It's a great pleasure to be here in Portugal again, in Lisbon, among great friends, and delighted to have, and a little fearful of the three that are sitting here across at the table. The book that I've written is really the culmination of about 3 decades of work in understanding how changes in media are forcing changes on existing media. And we have gone through dramatic changes in our lifetime: the arrival of television, the arrival of cable, the arrival of the internet. And these are having severe effects on the traditional workings of media companies of all times. And we're facing long-term challenges that are caused by these dislocations of these new media, of the way that audiences are using media, the time that they're giving to media. The fact that the audiences are now quite happy integrating uses of mobile and internet and social networking services, not only into their personal communications, but into their social communications and into their information gathering activities. And advertisers are responding to this shift in uses and looking for new and different ways to reach audiences. And this is stripping wealth out of media of all kind, not just out of news media, but out of existing traditional news media organizations doing more entertainment activities. And ultimately, what we have seen as we look at the statistics is that for about the past 30 to 40 years, there is a declining use of news media overall as the primary place where people are getting news and information. And this is, of course, very distressing to those people that operate and run news media, but it's also distressing to those of us who worry about society, because we are well aware that the public needs information in order for democracy to operate effectively. But what we miss is not that they are not necessarily using news and information less, but they're using it in different ways, and they're receiving it in very different forms than they did before. And so the news and information that is being shared in society is flowing through channels that were not typical 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And then, of course, we have the short-term challenges of the financial crisis that we've been in for the last 2 years. But these have really created a particular problem for news media, especially for newspapers. And we really have a great deal of discussion now of how this crisis is actually pushing news media to a position where there is some question about their sustainability in the long term. And so we are now dealing with a great deal of discussion with this in the short term. But the issues are much greater than just the issue of the current recession that we are facing. It is clear that change is coming and that organizations have to change. And one of the biggest problems that we're facing is the fact that organizations, news organizations, and media businesses as a whole have been used to operating in a very fine economic environment in which a great deal of wealth existed. And this, of course, essentially allowed media organizations to double and triple in their size in the last 20 and 30 years. And they created large organizations with large numbers of employees, with fine buildings, with corporate jets, with the whole range of things that come with success. And what we see now is that we are moving to a position where the unique access to audiences that media organizations had in the past is now being changed, and many more avenues to reaching the public are existing. And this means that they will not be able to sustain the kind of organizations that have been built in the past, nor continue with the same kind of content and means of operation than they have done in the past. And so from the business side, as we look at things, it essentially means that as we look to the future, many of the organizations, if they're going to survive, are going to have to become smaller. They're going to have to become much more agile and ability to react much more quickly to the environment. They are going to have to be looking at many more sources of financing than just the consumer and the advertiser. They're going to have to become much more innovative and entrepreneurial in terms of getting new products and services offered. And more important, this is something that many media companies have not been used to. They're going to have to start cooperating with other companies. Companies in the whole range of the value chain, suppliers, distributors, and the whole range. And this is something that is a new position for most media companies, because they typically tried to do things on their own or control all avenues or all parts of the value chain in the past. The underlying change that has to happen, though, in terms of operations is better value creation in the products and services that are offered. And this is particularly difficult because most media companies say, but we provide a very high quality service. The news is well done. We've spent 100 years creating the practices and the processes of journalism, and we now have a very high quality journalism. We have a way of delivering entertainment content to people that has proven to be very successful. And that is true. However, in the current environment and with the changes that are occurring in the way that people communicate in society, much of the value that was created by these traditional means of operation is being removed from those industries and those companies. And the book that I have written really looks at it in terms of specifically the news organizations, but many of the issues also apply to entertainment organizations as well. And one is going to have to think about the value that's being created in the content and find new ways to enhance that value along the way. Now, when I speak of value, we speak of it in two terms. We speak of it in philosophical terms, and we speak of it in economic terms. And it's important that we look at both of those and consider them both, because much of the reasons that we have media, much of the reasons that we think that media are important in society have to do with the philosophical side. But then we also have an economic side that is necessary to maintain the functioning of the organizations that provide us news, information, and entertainment. And from the philosophy side, essentially there are certain things that we think are good, and one of those is truth. And truth is an important aspect, particularly in the pursuit of news and information, trying to find out what is true in society. But it's also an important part of entertainment, because we very often use literature and motion pictures and television to get at those elements in society that wrestle with who and what we are and what is good and what is bad in society. There is also a value that's created in terms of philosophical terms, in that when we can do things that help us as a society be better bound together, when we have people aware of the world around us, when we understand the world around us, and when we feel we belong, these are important aspects for both society and for individuals. And they're what helps bind a cohesive society together and makes one country different from another, one culture different from another, because of these underlying values. From the economic side, of course, essentially what we're interested in is the ability to have some sort of exchange. In these days, usually for money, but it's based on the idea that you create something that is worth something to somebody, and that means it's useful to them, that they are willing to pay for it in some way. And of course, we know, and we've all, in our own studies of economics and in school, we know that value fluctuates, and that, you know, it is not constant over time, it changes over time. And the answers to why something is valuable and under what circumstances of value really create what we have in terms of exchange value. Now, this is where the problem is occurring today, because the circumstances under which value is being created in news media and general media today are very different than the circumstances 25 years ago. Yet most organizations want to continue working in the same way and creating the same value that they created before. And in fact, much of the value of what they are doing is in fact being stripped out from under them, making it more and more difficult to get people to pay for the services and the products that they have.